a born optimist. So when I was born, one of the first things I can remember is watching TV and seeing a man land on the moon. So I was 3 years old. I don't know how much detail I really remember, but there was something in the air, and that was some excitement. You know, black and white TV. Some of you don't remember. And it's really this, we can go to the moon. So we can do anything.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We have much better sound since that time. But this giant leap for mankind from Neil Armstrong was something which sort of started a journey. And the stories of that time, for me, growing up, was the stories of Gene Roddenberry here, behind the camera, the creator of Star Trek. And his enterprise, you know, the stories of, going to different planets and having all these gadgets and cool things was so amazing. This boldly go where nobody has gone before. And isn't that almost like growing up? You know, you have no idea where you end up. But what he created in this time from the 60s, where everybody was maybe worried either about, war times or Woodstock, so to say, in the middle, he created a life of 200 years from now, so 2,237. How can you imagine that? What he created with his team of writers, of stories, and gadgets in his movies is now what we call an iPad or a 3D printer or other things. So except for time travel, a lot of these things which he created just from his vision and pointing down is what we have. And also he was very audacious in his humanity approach, because Star Trek, other than other science fiction, actually was very humanitarian. There was the first interracial kiss. There was, robots and American and Russians in the same starship, and so on and so forth. So, stories. One of the stories which really inspired me when kind of making a career choice at the end of school was Tin Toy and Luxa Jr. from Pixar. And when Tin Toy won the first Oscar for a computer-animated film, '89, and that story, that kind of inspired me. I wanted to be a film producer for computer-animated films. Wow, you can make stories with a computer now, and this is so cool, so where can I go study? So I went to film schools, like, hey, I want to work with your computers. What do you mean computers? We don't have computers. You have to go to the IT guys. Okay, I went to the IT department and say, okay, I want to study with computers, but make films, creative stuff. No, you can learn assembler. Okay, so creative. So I went to, creative schools, graphic schools, and they were drawing figurines with, pencils. I said, okay, no, that's not good. So let me just start and just get a foot into this digital door and just start a job somewhere. And so that road into the digital era was really exciting. So one of the, we did a lot of first things, developing CD-ROMs and booking systems and, going into the online world. And that sounds really like story from other decades, because it was really in the last century. And so one of the first labels I got was a pioneer in virtual worlds, and that was very inspiring, of course. And it was just going up, up, up. Digital was, more, and more brands were working with it. I worked with agencies before, and that, got me into America. A lot of travel, San Francisco, obviously. And one defining moment was also I was at actually one of the TEDs originally in Monterey, and there were only 400 people in the room. But with me were Marvin Minsky and Nicholas Negroponte and, all these cool people. And Mark Andreessen goes on stage and shows the first time Mosaic and says, wow, here you can click on the word and turns purple. And then the next page is somewhere in Australia. It's like, what does that mean? But then, okay, that was 20 minutes off. Then was Jane Goodall and Herbie Hancock was playing music. So crazy, but everything was in this room, and everything, again, was possible. This combination of stories and technology and research together with the internet was sort of like a beehive, and I was hooked. So, Monterey, nice place. In my, young life, I raised a family, 2 beautiful daughters, and, Tuscany and flowers is something really, a happy place. Another happy place and a dream of mine was living in America. So we moved at the end of around 1998 to New York. My office was in Soho. Our house was in Connecticut, and we had like the best life ever. Seeing all the real life and the brands, all this sort of the headquarter of media and the internet. And during the day and on the weekends, you have barbecues with so many cool friends. And so again, NASDAQ was going up, everything was great. I started a startup and so on. And then so obviously nobody was prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for that. So I was standing at 42nd and 5th Avenue. Still remember, I had my first digital camera taking pictures at this, there was a letterbox, and going down, looking down 5th Avenue, you see the tower, in dust and then crumble. And that was sort of a very hard time. But that time, 9/11, 2001, 4 weeks later, I was supposed to have a kidney transplant. The day after 9/11, the doctor called, no, this is postponed. We have no idea what will happen. Can be months, we have no idea. So that was very frightening. Not only having kind of the visual memory sticking to TV for a week, I don't know what you have done, but everybody knows where you have been. And so kind of my health was deteriorated. The society around me was crumbling. My startup was falling because the VC in Germany kind of pulled all the money. The clients were either didn't have their job anymore, or about $250,000 of orders was also pulling. So this was definitely a ground zero for me. And there's a song from Bruce Springsteen, if you don't know it, Empty Sky, and it kind of resembles really, you look at, and it's all there, but something is missing. But it was hard to go from that and define this as sort of an empty canvas again, because you were really looking only into the tunnel. So a couple of years later, and part of maybe my healing was to go to Burning Man. And actually in '93 and earlier in Wired, I read 15 years before I actually went about Burning Man. I really wanted to go, and life happened, you never really go, and this and that, and it's so fascinating. But you can't really do that. So finally I was there, and that was really cool. And that in a way probably saved me, because that changed my life. If Burning Man is this amazing festival with these principles and no commerce, and actually by that time there was also no Wi-Fi, so now you have all Instagram and stuff, not by that time. So you have to be really with yourself. You're with the elements, sun, storms, snowstorms, all of these things. And for me it was like I was in Neverland again. I took I think 9,500 photos in 2 days, just like, wow, the sunset, the sun, this, and the art, and all these amazing people in the community was so inspiring, and just kind of everybody was hugging each other and giving gifts. And if you haven't done it, please go. And one of the things, on Saturday night, the man burns, but the next day, the temple burns. And so that's one of the things, it's probably my, let's say, holy grail at a new ground zero for me, because the temple is something which has nothing to do with religion, but it's a very spiritual place. And every time it's a new one, because it burned the last year, right? So it's from wood, and you can sit there a day, and you can kind of admire the people and just kind of say nothing for a day and kind of just be you. And that is also something, the first time they build it, it's all very, virgin. But on the next days, they write love letters on the wood, and they put divorce papers or put kind of staple pictures on it. Or you see also memorabilia and say, okay, how is she going to be remembered? Her friends put her stuff there, and there's a place. And then the next day, on that Sunday, before Labor Day, the temple burns, and there's a totally different, that's not a party. That's something, nobody talks, and it's really you take it in. Because the next day you go back to that default world. And this is sort of a shrine which you take with you. And I definitely did, and that kind of started to reflect on me, like, what is really me, and what am I with communities, and how can I bring this into my life? So I started MLOVE as a community right after Burning Man, and said, I want to have these cool people in my life, or part of them, and I don't want to wait a year to go to that desert up in San Francisco, and you travel 8 hours, and this, very cumbersome, but it has to be a cool place, and it has not be in the city. So we kind of took over this little castle south of Berlin. It was very successful in kind of just having the technology part, but also, and what MLOVE stands for, is a meaning for passion in technology. A passion for meaning in technology. So I became a curator, and starting with the iPhone and starting in mobile phones, traveling the world. Photography is a passion of mine, collecting moments, but somehow I've been always on the run. A friend of mine says, there's 2 airplanes over the Atlantic, and I'm sitting in both of them. But I'm always sitting in the wood class, so don't think I'm sitting in the front row. But part of my travel is when I was in Hamburg, or I live in Hamburg, and 2015 we were one of the cities also involved with the, let's say, refugee crisis. And together with a couple of friends, we built a clinic in containers for the refugees, Refugee First Response Center, which we also wanted to bring to Lebanon. We actually brought one. And when I was in Bekaa Valley, that was a totally different part of my journey, and a very kind of inspiring one again. So you see here, there's 1 million people in Lebanon with all their difficulties in their lives, and just 20 miles here from the Syrian border. And I visited refugee camp school, and there was a press club, and I met a girl. It's called Wahid, and an English name is Promise. And she wrote a letter, and I just want to read a second to you. They call me a refugee. Why? I'm not a refugee. I'm a Syrian child with a name and an identity. I am from the land of civilization and culture. It was a land of peace. We come here as guests. So why do they call us refugees? Syria was and remains a tender mother. They close. My name means promise, and my promise is that I will not carry the name of refugee forever. And if you, Wahid is the girl with a red scarf in this picture, and I was, again, sort of, that was a moment, I was weeping the whole day, just like hearing the story, and can you hear and feel the determination of this girl at her age and say, no, I will not take this as my final answer. I will get out of this, and I will have the aspiration to not be labeled a refugee. I want to have a life. And so that kind of hit home, and we, with a couple of friends, Dave and Diana, Ape, we started Promise Hub. It's a small group of couple of people, and said, okay, Promise, we want to help Promise and bring Promise to the world. So we are building a school for entrepreneurs, not for kids to do the 1, 2, 3 and ABC, but we want to see, can we bring opportunity to where people are? So this is a humble beginning of a new school in Uganda, which we open in a month from now, in Nakivale, which is the largest and I think the oldest refugee camp in the world. Not the largest, but the oldest, and about 50 years since its beginning. And it's built not from a container, which we first thought, but it's from plastic bottles, which they could collect in just a week, 20,000 plastic bottles. But so when we open this, we have an impact team who work already since almost half a year with Patrick and Deborah, and people who say, okay, can we help you train others? How can we bring digital opportunity to where you are? Hook you up with Amazon, DHL, or some logistics company, maybe bring banking, and how can we bring what we have as access to where they are, and how can we improve their lives where they are? They don't have to move to other cities. How can we help them do what they have to do and can do? So I think the promise and potential and purpose, if you combine that, that is something which is sort of obviously the strongest in a world of adversity. If you can be you, and if you can see and be prepared of what's coming. I mean, nobody's prepared. This world is more uncertain than ever, but it means that you have to be stronger than ever, which also means you're open for opportunities. So if I zoom out, and we are looking at this picture from Christmas time, 1968 again, the first time Apollo looked back at Earth. And I talk about moonshots, but it's not necessarily and only to go to space and to where nobody has else gone before, but it's actually to go out there and look back and see what we have, not only what we are seeking. So that's the hardest part. And so we see that we are all humans, right? So we are the world. We can make this a better place, and we can tie this together to work where we want to go. If I zoom back a little bit, what I'm working right now is on the European side, and not only looking for Silicon Valley anymore. We are here where the X is. I'm living there in Hamburg, and I think we have this open society and diversity, which is a gift to the world. And one of the artists which inspired me was Antonio Gaudi, and he built a church, or he envisioned Sagrada Familia, which will take 100 years after his death and will only be completed 2026, when we have the tools and invention which he envisioned so long time ago. So what is the ideas for the future? And so we actually, not being a film producer, but somebody who is inspiring ideas, we collected about 1,000 videos about ideas for desirable futures and see if there's a new Gene Roddenberry who has an idea from now, maybe it's here in the room, what and how do we want to live 100 years from now? And if we can put this into place, somebody will build it what we call now an iPad is maybe in 40 years something else. So in closing, there's so many different labels of my little story, and hopefully this is only half of what I will envision. But I learned one word in Yiddish when I was in New York, and that is sort of maybe a summary of where I hope I will be in one of these days. And if you are, when you die, what people say there is, he is a Mensch or she is a Mensch, which is German, and it's human. But that's sort of a noble person who is, serving the community more and is giving more than taking. And if we can be everybody a little bit more of this, I think we can be part of the solution and part of the world. So in closing, I have like one little quote, which is from Steve Jobs: "Technology is not enough. Is technology married with the liberal arts, married with the humanities that yield us to the results that make our hearts sing?" So I hope we can sing together, and shukra.